Nobody ever goes up to a baker that makes a really good cake and says, wow, that was a really good oven. It's the baker. Welcome to another episode of the Rough Cut Club. I am your host, Joey Nicotra, here with my very special co-host, Mr. Shane Reitzammer. Shane, how's it going, brother?
Good, man. Good. Ready to be back in the studio to make a couple more podcasts.
Very excited to be back in the studio today, man. We have a very special episode today. Something that has never happened on the Rough Cut Club is happening today. We have our first Rough Cut Club new member joining us today, Mr. Andy B.
Yes, sir.
Andy Baeza. I always call
Baeza.
you Andy B, but...
Hey, I take it. I've heard every permutation you can make of my name, from Baeza to Barza to...
And that's B-A-E-Z-A. Super cool
Say
last
it one
name.
more time.
Baeza.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Baeza.
Andy, welcome to the podcast,
Absolutely.
man.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know Andy, Andy is pretty much a filmmaking extraordinaire who has worked on a ton of really cool projects in his life and has done a ton of projects with Shane and myself, has edited at this point hundreds of videos, probably.
If not thousands.
Yeah, if not thousands. With us, and so he has been a good friend of ours, our backbone to the projects that we do together. For those who want to learn a little bit more about you and your backstory, tell us a little bit about your journey into filmmaking.
Yeah, so man, that's a long story. It's been a long time. So I started in audio. Started in the studio. I've been a musician for 31 years now. I really feel old at this point.
He just gave away his age.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say when I started. I just said I've been one for 30. I could be 32 for all
That's
you
right.
know. I started in middle school, middle school band and all that stuff, and then was a classically trained musician, was a horn performance major in college. And when I was probably a junior, I had been playing guitar for several years and was in a band and was started writing my own stuff and was recording on my computer in my bedroom of my apartment. We didn't have near the gear that we have now. There was no interface that you could plug in USB. It was literally, I was plugging into my sound card of my computer with my amp, with a regular emulated line out from my amp. It was rough. But I went to a studio in Lubbock where I went to school, and the guy was like, man, if I could get guitars to sound this good, I'd be really happy. And I was like, that doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence in the studio.
Right.
It was a great studio, though. I mean, $1 million studio. The place was incredible. And we went in to record, and it sounded massive. It just felt larger than life when we were tracking. And when he did a rough mix and had the owner of the studio there one day, and he was like, bro, listen to this. And they were like, hey, why don't you come in and start, helping me with some guitar tones on this band? So I was like, sure. Came in, started helping them, and then that turned into another one, and then another one, and then I became an intern, and I was there all the time. I just never left. And then that worked my way up to my first major label record, and then another one, and then another one, and it just kind of spiraled from there. I was...
And for those that don't know, give some quick name drops to some of the big bands that you got to work with back in the day.
So Perfect Circle, that was the first one that I ever got to work on. Lamb of God, they're some great guys. Some of the best people you'll ever meet in the industry, even though they sound like the darkness rising up. No, but they're phenomenal. Love those guys.
Linkin Park.
I knew that one was coming.
Huge. Name the album that you worked on.
So there was Meteora, and then there was. I wish I had been able to do their last one.
Yeah.
That was the one that I listen to it now, and I'm like, I wish I had the availability.
Didn't you do what is it, Minutes to Midnight?
Minutes to Midnight as well. Yeah. So I did
their most classic album to date. Andy did.
that record was such a special time. And you know, Chester's voice has always been just magical to me. And so like Meteor, I was doing just, you know, Pro Tools programming, helping, you know, organize stuff, and, you know, mediocre, like peon stuff. And I got to play a bigger role the next time around, doing drums and helping with that kind of stuff. And it was just magic, man. Yeah. The seeing a record like that just come together from nothing.
Right.
And that's kind of been how it always is. Like, I'd come in, we would do work, and then I would leave, and then I'd come back in, and then it'd be like, wow, this is really starting to come together. And then we'd do more work, and then it's a blast, man.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you work on an Imagine Dragons project?
So too? I did work on an Imagine Dragons project. This was later, much later. So I started editing video in 2011, 2010. And, you know, back then it was Final Cut 7, some Avid, unfortunately, still the bane of my existence.
Everyone's existence.
And I got into some of the bands that I was working with.
Yeah.
I got into doing, you know, cutting some of their music videos and whatnot. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, you got to cut this one. Yeah. And so I worked on Believer, and which was a lot of fun. Now the VFX guys that came in and did all the compositing after the fact, those guys are magic.
Yeah.
Like they made that video.
Yeah.
You know, it looks great. You know, it's fun. It was cool, but not like those guys.
Yeah.
VFX artists, I have no idea how you guys really do everything that you do.
Shout out. So anyway, you got a really impressive resume from the projects that you've worked on.
I've been around for a little. I've been fortunate. I've been fortunate and in the right place at the right time in a lot of things.
Super cool.
And it's, you know, it's relationship.
Yeah.
The way this industry goes, and it's, you know, whether it's filmmaking or whether it's audio or whether it's, you know, music in general.
Yeah.
It's relationships.
Yeah.
It's the relationships that you build and you cultivate and you pour into. It's the same thing with life, right? You know, when you're building and developing and growing a relationship with your now wives, right? It's the time you pour into those relationships, build those to what they become and how solid they are. And if you don't take the time to do that, it's the same thing in this kind of realm and business and everything else.
It's so true, because our wives joke and say that Joey and I are dating because all the time we put into our
work husband.
My wife calls Keelan Moore my girlfriend because the girlfriend tells the boyfriend what to do, right? And so when I used to work for Keelan, but we were inseparable. Like Jessica, another friend we worked with, called us milk and cookies, because we were always inseparable.
That's so good.
And that's just
awesome.
how it was. Yeah,
good people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to really dive into today, Andy's a good friend of Shane and myself, and one of the things that came to our attention a couple weeks ago is that we all edit differently, completely differently. And we wanted to battle it out today so that I can prove to everyone that my way is superior.
Round one.
We're going Mortal Kombat style on this.
What are we ranking this on? The fastest? Because I think the Final Cut Pro kids over here have you beat.
All right. So just to take my stance, this is going to be Team Adobe in this corner right here, Team Premiere. And then we got the dark side.
Well, to be fair, I am fairly brand agnostic. Both whether cameras or editors. I will say I hate Premiere with the fire of 1,000 suns. And not because of the tools necessarily.
Yeah.
Because I mean it is a powerful program, and it has a lot of tools they've integrated over the years. The AI features they've added, phenomenal. Right? There's so many tools in there that you just really don't get in other editors. The problem is it crashes. Like
I will say though that since I got my M1 Mac, I have not had Premiere crash one time.
You're one of the lucky few.
Yes.
And I mean few.
Believe me, pre M1, especially when you work with bigger projects, it's been pretty good to me on like smaller ones. But when you get into complex timelines on the pre M1 system, for me, it definitely, you'll see like current V9 or whatever it is, version 9.
Yeah, it has come along.
Yeah.
Like the last few updates have actually been very nice as far as stability goes. But for me, every time I step into Premiere, I feel like I'm stepping back into early versions of Final Cut 7. And
which was a great program.
It was a great program at the time.
Yeah, at the time.
It was incredibly powerful at the time, and there's still like Parasite was edited on, and it's an Academy Award-winning film, and it was edited on Final Cut 7.
Yeah,
for the most part, So that's not to say that even now these tools aren't good to use. I mean, you can, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
But for me, Premiere was broke, so I just, because I'll use DaVinci. I'll use CapCut if the project calls for it. Like, I'm not above using something like CapCut, even as a professional. It's a tool for a job,
right?
And for me, the only problem with Premiere is that the workflow feels very antiquated. And
what do you mean by that?
So, when I work in Final Cut is very intuitive for me. Now, I have taken the time to learn the shortcuts, and I do most of my editing on the keyboard. I'm not doing a lot of mouse clicking and dragging and all the other stuff until I get into doing like color correction and things like that, and I'm physically having to move stuff around like that. In Resolve, you can have those control panels where you have all your knobs and wheels, and that's fantastic. I don't have that because I have children, so 5 of them, and so it's one of the it's one of those
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Andy, the color on this looks really interesting. My 5-year-old did it.
My 5-year-old did that one. Yeah, so no, it's one of those things where I tend to spend most of my time in editing is spent going through their footage, picking my favorites, and like in Final Cut, I have essentially made my edit before I ever drop anything on the timeline.
Ooh, see, this is where we got to dig in.
So this is where we got to dig in, because Joey is a big fan of throwing the footage on the timeline, organizing it by color, and he has a color coding system where he can. Like, he knows that all of this orange here, so this is going to be if he's doing a wedding, right? So this is going to be all of the groom, and then the pink here is going to be all the bride, and then the magenta over here is going to be all of this, and then all of the... And he chops all this stuff up, moves it all in place.
Fidgeting right now.
I am so uncomfortable hearing that process.
Hey, so this is what's going to shock everyone. I don't use bins at all. At all. But see, the reason why is because I can throw everything on the timeline.
Right.
I color code it by the scene, whatever the scene is, and I know visually at a glance where everything is. And I just start cutting all of the fat down.
So I do that too.
But you do it in bins. But I do it.
I don't do it in bins though, because okay.
In and out points.
To be fair, bins in Premiere are like events in Final Cut and et cetera, et cetera.
Events.
Or keywords.
Keywords.
So you have, I can keyword collection my entire library, right? So every clip in my library can be keyworded, and whether that's just with the folder. So like if say we're doing a project for a client and there's 2 different shooters, you and somebody else, and then drone footage and audio and all that stuff, I can take all of that, just grab the folders, throw them into Final Cut, and it will create a keyword collection of those folders inside of my project. Then from there, I can either view all of them as a whole, or I can go into individual keywords and view just those things. So it's like, for Final Cut, it's like having the best of both worlds, where I can just have everything in one view, or I can go the bin route. It really depends on how you want to work. It's very flexible that way. It gives you the option without having to create new folders and drag stuff in, right? And hide them and bury them away.
Okay, I got to jump in.
He's like squirming in his chair.
Okay, disclaimer: I haven't edited in about 2 years, and I was a very fast and efficient Final Cut Pro 10 editor.
And I'll jump in
sure
and
there's
say
some updates.
I'll jump in and say Shane and Andy are the fastest editors that I know to date. Shane was a very, very fast editor. Go ahead.
And so, well, thank you. I think Andy would run around circles. I was in Final Cut the other day trying to export some stems for a super old project that I had done.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember my keyword. Like, it was like riding a bike. It started to come back, like the keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
But I was like, dude, I would lose so much
of the
speed.
game, out of
So
touch.
keyboard shortcuts and bins or keywords is what we call them in Final Cut were huge. So I want to ask this because I think you and I have had this kind of debate way back in the day. But so you're doing an edit.
Yep.
It's kind of a destructive edit in a way. I mean, it's non-linear.
Yeah.
It's not really destructive.
Right.
You can go back and get it, but you're dropping it on the timeline and you say you're cutting fat. Mm-hmm. So, and so I've edited the way that you're talking about before on certain projects, and we can kind of circle to that. But I would still use bins or keywords. Once you decide you're cutting that fat, you can never go back?
Well, I can because like you can re-reference the media in either the media browser or the project panel, right? So if I know after going through everything, there was a moment in there that I'm like, or if I really need something, right? I can always go back and drag the clip back onto my timeline and redo it.
How do you find that though? Because if you have your timeline right, and are you deleting as you're going through it and getting rid of?
I'm super destructive when I edit. In that but like here's the thing: when you're trimming fat on a project, like I'm trimming stuff that 100% will not make it into it. Like when you start a clip and the camera is like coming
wobbly, and
or the end of it when it's like, all right, you're swinging it down to stop record or whatnot. Like that is fat that you will never use.
Right.
And so that
We
all
do the
goes
same
away.
thing.
Right.
We just do it differently.
Right. But so if I need, for instance, like a bin, so to speak, the way I do it is I'll create a new sequence. And so all of my stuff, but I don't do this like crazy. It's only for really
complex stuff.
Correct.
Right. That you end up nesting in and dropping in.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'll nest it. I'll make a new sequence where it's like, whatever, anyway, I'll create a sequence as needed to simplify on the timeline.
Yeah.
But if I'm working in bins with in and out points, to me, I don't visually have at a glance an idea of what footage I really have.
Can you look at it in Premiere? So this is my ignorance here with Premiere, but can you look at like thumbnails in Premiere like we can with Final Cut?
You can now. You weren't always able to.
See, they're so behind.
They added this. They added this a few years ago, and in your project viewer where you have all your bins and all your footage or whatever else, you can view it by as a list view. That's how it always used to be. It was a list view, and now you can actually hit thumbnails and you can see all your thumbnails. The difference is, so I think where we get hung up in Premiere is viewing those thumbnails. I still have to double click it and bring it over to a preview window, basically, to view it full size.
You can mouse scrub.
You can scrub.
Yeah, you can scrub it,
but it's not full view.
It's inside of the thumbnail.
It's inside of the thumbnail.
Right.
So, and you can miss stuff like that. You can miss little things or, and so for us, when we're culling through footage in Final Cut, right? When we're trimming the fat, we're rejecting those.
Right.
You find that area in, out, delete, in, out, delete, in, out, delete.
Yep.
And it disappears from our main view unless we say all clips.
Right.
Instead of hide rejected.
Yeah.
So for me, like I'll go through and I'll get rid of the stuff I know I'm not going to use. Like I'll do that first. I'll go through, get rid of all that, and then I'll go through and I'll start marking favorites. So these are my favorite things, and the favorite organization is probably, in my opinion, it's one of the best tools that Final Cut has for really getting your edit started quickly. Because I can find all of my favorite things, whether I'm going through a whole interview and just pulling out just their answers first, so that I'm only viewing their answers in my browser, or if I'm like finding like the nuggets, like just those moments of like absolutely have to have this. This is my closing sound bite. This is my cold open. This is what, whatever that may be. I can go through and find all that and have it marked, have it ready to go, and it's done. The thing is that in Premiere, I don't have that ability unless I cut it out and move it into a sequence.
But see, this is how so when I'm dropping everything into the timeline, this is full workflow right here, right? I go through and immediately everything is organized by color. So like I'll pull my scenes and I put a little space between them on the timeline, and then I'll color it. And so everything, all the scenes, I know visually at a glance. Oh, my timelines look so awesome. They look way cooler than y'all's.
There's so much stuff on your timeline.
But I know
it just makes it look busy for no reason.
It makes it look sexy for sure. So when I put everything on a timeline, everything's color coded. I put a space between every scene, right? So at a glance, I know where all my scenes are.
Right.
From there, I trim all the fat, condense the projects, and then for me, instead of making favorites, I'll take all of my selects and I'll move it to the second layer. I'll recondense them, so now I know all of the stuff that I'm for sure
you're going to use are all up on that
is
track.
all on that layer. So once I lay my A-roll in over the music, which is step one always, which I think we do the same for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
Then I'll just move that whole favorite section in, and I can just start shifting and divvying it out. And so instead of having like this favorites folder that I'm referencing, it's already in the project, and I just shift it and move it around.
So yes.
And I just find that it's a much more like efficient flow for me.
Okay, so I in color coding, I do the same thing color coding wise. So So I create video rolls and audio rolls.
Okay.
For everything.
Yeah.
So say a short film, like the What Lies Within that we just finished. Mm-hmm. So with all of my audio, I have audio rolls for everything. And the feature that I did...
And explain audio rolls for people that don't know what that means.
Yeah, so audio rolls are a way of categorizing your audio into the type of file that, like the type of audio you're using in the project, whether that's dialogue or effects or music and you can create new rolls. Those are the three that come standard in Final Cut, right? You have two main video rolls. You have video and titles, and then you have three main audio rolls. You have... dialogue, effects, and music. And when you go and like Final Cut comes with like a stock library of sound effects that you can pull from if you or you can add your own. And I add an alias folder into my computer, so I have all of my sound design files that I've ever categorized or created or anything else, and they're all in this thing, and I can always access them at any point in time.
Yeah.
In my Final Cut library, just by I don't have to import them in. I don't have to go hunt it down. I can literally just pull it up in there, search, whoosh or...
But you can import all that stuff in Premiere as well.
But I don't need to import it all. It's already there, available. I just literally just type it in and search.
You can pull it into any project.
Any project, anytime.
I do the same thing with like my art list, music, soundtracks, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yep. And I have a playlist of nothing but art list or Epidemic Sound or whatever. I happen to use it for the project. So the same thing. So... But with audio rolls, you can break it down even further. So you can have different sub rolls. So for like, I create one for Foley. I create one for, I'll break it down to risers and hits and whooshes and ambience and like all of those things. And then that way, whenever I'm going in to do like the sound mix on it, I can have all of that stuff already grouped. And I can treat, and then like when it comes to like do the final master on it, if I'm mastering inside of Final Cut rather than taking it into like Pro Tools or something like that, I can view all of that stuff, and it basically creates an auxiliary bus, which you would do like in Pro Tools you can do it in Premiere. It's just kind of clunky. Resolve has probably the best bus audio editing.
Yeah.
Capabilities out of all of them, honestly. And and I say that as a Final Cut guy, but it's true because they have Fairlight built in, and Fairlight is another DAW like Pro Tools or Logic or whatever that you can actually do full mixes on inside of Resolve, which is really handy. I don't always want to go that route though. So if I'm doing it in Final Cut, I can literally organize and see everything broken down on one track. If I view my audio lanes, it shows an audio lane for every single thing. And I can group it by type. I mean, all of the above.
See, it's funny because we do similar things. I just do it
a different way. Right. And so it's like color coding. I use video rolls to color code my video rolls. So A roll, B roll, scene this, scene that, all of that stuff is broken down. And whenever I'm viewing my audio lanes, so like here's one thing that really helped me out in Final Cut. So on the left-hand side, you have this thing that says index. Mm-hmm. You click on the index, you click on rolls, and down at the bottom it says show audio lanes. Now you can see all of your rolls. They're all there. Like, you know, you can hide stuff that you don't want to look at the time. You can focus only on your B-roll here. Yeah. You can focus only on this. You can focus only on that. And you can collapse everything down to make it super small, whatever. Or you can just hide it all together. Yeah. If you have captions, you can see your captions there, all that stuff. The show audio lanes that's one of the things that gets Premiere users hung up because it looks like they have a video track and then they have music underneath and they don't see their audio. They feel like they can't control their audio. Well, if you're looking at just the timeline, right, you have control over your audio on the clip itself. Right. Instead of it being on a separate track underneath it, it just puts it on the clip. So you can you can just look at your clip and make your adjustments, right? And when you show audio lanes, it separates it out just like it does in Premiere. And so
you're talking about it separates the waveform?
Yes, it pulls the waveform off the audio.
You can do that in a separate panel though. In Premiere.
No. I'm talking about, okay, so in Premiere, in your sequence.
Yeah.
How you have your video tracks and your audio tracks underneath. In Final Cut, in just your standard timeline, without making any adjustments to it, you have all of your clips and all of your audio is sitting on the clip, right?
Yep.
And so you're adjusting volume up and down, doing all that stuff, but you don't have audio tracks underneath.
But see, I like the audio tracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then in Final Cut, you would hit show audio lanes.
Right.
And then all of your audio is broken out. And how many times have you had to go in on an edit and you've got audio and you want to J-cut your audio, but it's an interview, so it's kind of the same thing. So you have to bring one back and bring the other one over and move stuff around,
slide it over, yeah.
And then maybe add a fade here and there or whatever, right? But you don't necessarily want to cut one short. You just want to extend the other one, so you have to move it down to another track and then move it and all that. Okay,
so a lot of work right there.
Yeah, so that's a pain in the butt.
That's why Final Cut is faster.
Move it, and it's done, and it automatically shifts. It you don't have to create new tracks; it automatically does it for you.
See, I like dropping the audio down a layer and J-cutting it over so that I can see visually though how far it is.
But I don't have to actually create a new track; it just automatically does it for me.
See, the more messy my timeline is, the better. Give me all the tracks. I gotta have the final screenshot at the end that shows that I'm just more.
So
advanced.
I'll show a screenshot here of that film we were talking about, and you'll see all of my audio clips here. So if I'm thinking about it, on the bottom half you'll see all of my audio clips. You'll see all the color coding for all the stuff I did. But then on this screenshot, you'll see that it's just the final that actually got exported, where everything is down in a compound clip and you see all the rolls. And that's
compound clip. You hear these nerds?
That's a nest. It's a nest. Get over it. It's the same thing.
Hey, but I think Joe, you're wrapped up on like I want to post this on IG, and it does look really cool. I'm
cool,
like, Joey, can we get another one of those?
Yeah.
It's like 10 feet tall.
Yeah, I ain't gonna argue. It looks cool because you got 18 different.
And I think what Andy's saying too is that we can do that. And
for sure,
it's how you organize and color your tracks. And what I found too is
it just gives me mad anxiety when and
I think it comes down to this. I think there's obviously a lot of different ways to edit in any NLE system, right? For sure. But I think and maybe I'm guessing here, but I think for Joey, he's very visually, and I think all three of us are very visual. Right. But Joey, being a DP, he wants to have this control all on the timeline and be able to go through the clips, and he's willing to sacrifice the time that he takes to do that over the
he's like 100%.
Hold up.
The speed because hold up. So with the organizing, but here's the thing, I think that Joey is able to make a decision and go, I won't use this clip, destructive, bye, clip is gone.
Same thing.
I'm over there. Well, I'm putting it in a bin and I'm going, I'm probably not going to use this clip. But if I have to use this clip, I know where it is and it's good to go. And I've already kind of vetted it and keyword in and out. spots, and I've made my selects, right?
Yeah.
So I do a lot of organizing
Yeah.
and keywords. I do all the work on the front end because then I can switch from logistical minded to creative mind, and then I'm working with a fresh, clean timeline. I've actually edited several projects like you do.
Yeah.
In fact, I was doing like a series. This was back, we were doing, I won't say the client's name,
Sure.
but a performing artist, and we were making a series. And so same thing, I dropped it all out. And what I realized was, for me at least, and you probably mastered this because you are fast. You're not a slow editor by any means. But for me, it wasn't efficient because I would go down the timeline,
That's the key word for me.
grab the clip, bring it back over and put it in, and then I'm like, oh, I got to scroll back to I need this little story piece, right? Because we even just pull an A-roll, and I had made my selects for each of these episodes, and then I was trying to do, an edit of an episode in the timeline, and then I would go back and go, well, I need something else. And I realized that was the moment I was like, I was kind of experimenting with that method that I think we had talked about. And I go, man, if I just had this in bins for me, it is, or keywords, it's so much quicker to go question, answer. What was this question? Here are the good parts that I might use.
Right.
And and because Final Cut is so visual in the thumbnail and being able to scrub through it, and it automatically puts it in the viewer, and you're not having, it's clicks. Right? I mean, you talk about website marketing strategy, the less clicks, the better, right? One pages, all this stuff. And for me, that was so true for my creative process. The less clicks that I have to do, the more I can focus on the story and selecting the visuals. But again, I don't think either way is wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's depends on... Andy's over there smiling. He's like,
No, I was just gonna say,
he's like, maybe one's a little more right than the other.
Yeah.
It might not be wrong.
If Premiere and Final Cut were pay per click programs, the way that a lot of like marketing ad buys and stuff like that are, no one could ever afford Premiere. We'll just
That's such a good analogy.
That is actually really good. Now, I'm even just on the vein of price point, though. One thing that Final Cut takes a dub on is price point.
Always.
All day.
And price point and
the one-time buy,
it's
non-subscription.
You don't have to keep it and I understand why they do. I understand why so many companies have gone to that subscription-based
pricing.
It.
They'll make more money.
One, people will pay for it, but two, it does allow them to continue to pour into R&D.
Right.
It does allow them to pour money into advancing the program, and that's fantastic.
Right.
I don't fault companies for doing subscription-based pricing. My issue with subscription-based pricing comes down to there's two kinds of project workflows that are really, really common in the software development world. You have the waterfall method, and then you have the Scrum method, right? The agile thing. So with waterfall, it's like, direction is given from up top, and then it comes down here, and then by the time it gets down there, you're just getting little trickles of the project as you go along, right? It's like it's like if we were going to do an edit, you'd be like, okay, well, here's the A roll. I'll get you the B roll next week. You got B roll now? Okay, well. Yeah. Oh, here's some more A-roll that we forgot that we filmed. So here's that too. And here's drone footage. I'll get that to you next week though. Don't worry about the drone footage. It's that kind of thing. Whereas like with what a lot of software developers do with Scrum is they will work on teams will have little sections of the projects or whatever that these are their specific things and it's all parts of the whole.
Yeah.
And they will release a program that is 60% done. And with plans to make updates.
Testing.
With plans to make updates.
Yeah.
And so you'll get a beta of the next update, and then a beta of the next update, and a beta of the next update. But that update still hasn't solved this thing that we had 6 updates ago.
Right.
And we're still waiting for this one thing. Now, to be fair, Final Cut does update the same thing. But I'm not paying $500 a year for the entire Final Cut suite when I have, I have.
It's actually like
Motion.
$650 or something like that.
I pay for it every year, and every time I see it hit my card, I'm like, oh my gosh! If I could just say goodbye to it forever, I would. Yeah. But I still use a lot of the tools. I love After Effects.
Yeah,
I love After Effects.
I hadn't even got there yet. We got to talk about the whole creative
I love After
cloud.
Effects. No, it's fantastic. Like Lightroom is fantastic.
Yep.
Photoshop is fantastic.
Yep.
I use Capture One.
See these?
I have both.
Yeah.
I still have, and it's like I'm still paying money for all this, right? I have all this stuff.
Right.
But I like Capture One for me, Capture One is like Final Cut.
Yeah.
Versus Premiere.
Yeah.
Capture, I can edit quickly. I can.
I feel like Lightroom is so intuitive, though, man. Like from a photo
yes and no
standpoint.
But once
yes
I
and no.
yes and no. Once I got into Capture One, I was like, this is so much easier.
See, I can't.
And it's so much more efficient because you've never used it.
I've never used it. Yeah.
Capture One's fantastic now, especially because so like I do a lot of headshots when I'm doing photos, and it's easy. It's the easiest program to tether into. It's the easiest way to view and edit stuff like that.
Lightroom's pretty easy.
You can tether, but it's not as powerful as the tethering inside of Capture One, and so there's a lot of stuff that Capture One just just works.
Yeah,
and that's like Final Cut. Final Cut for me just works.
Yeah.
No shade to Adobe people anywhere because I do use it when I do use it when I need to. But this is no longer the Rough Cut Club; it's the Shade Cut Club. No, but it's all about the tool for the job. And so like for me, if I got to bring out a bigger hammer, I'm going to bring out a bigger hammer.
Yeah.
If I got to, we just did the whiskey commercial, right?
Right.
It came out awesome. Looks fantastic. I used DaVinci for the entire thing.
Yeah.
I did not touch Final Cut for any of it.
Yeah.
Which made me feel really weird because I was like, I'm having an affair on my baby over here. Like I'm cheating on Final Cut. But at the same time,
Apple.
Right.
They don't pay me anyway. It's fine. But no, like I actually had a good time editing in it, and a lot of the tools that they've brought into it over the years have are cool, and it was nice. You can't beat the color grading capabilities of Resolve. You just can't.
Yeah.
And for a long time, Final Cut couldn't keep up with anybody on color, and so that and so like a lot of the, for those that don't know the history, Final Cut 7 was an industry standard. There were companies that would sell you Final Cut 7 setups, and it would have like everything you needed. Like you would have an entire hardware and software system devoted to Final Cut 7 to give you the best possible editing workflow around. It was awesome. Final Cut decided to move on to Final Cut 10.
Mm-hmm.
And much like Premiere does now with its updates, it was not ready.
Which is so weird that it went from
7 to 10 instead of 8. Yeah, well,
yeah,
they were trying to
to
capitalize on like the just the massiveness of what the program could do.
Yeah.
Because here's the guys that really created it.
Yeah.
The guys that really created it, they actually had it's a brilliant concept. I'm sorry. I love the magnetic timeline, and some of you guys are going to hate on it. I love the magnetic timeline. It makes my life so easy.
Here's something that we're going to argue about then, because I actually get rid of the
gap clips.
I put a gap clip. I put it on the whole timeline. So then I can
a good gap.
That hurts my heart.
Yeah. And I used to work with the magnetic, but man, and maybe you can. And again, I'm
because don't you have to actually create like dead space if you want a gap? Like you have to
Option W.
You got to quick. Yeah, you can quickly do it.
Option W, or if so that's the other thing. It's use the other delete key. So if you're cutting and you want to leave space there, if you don't want to use the magnetic thing and collapse everything there, you just want to leave that gap so you can drop something on top of it or find something to replace it later, whatever. Use the other delete key.
Keyboard shortcuts.
You have to know your
editor.
Any editor. It doesn't matter what it is.
Starting out, man, learn that. Like I literally practiced just keyboard shortcuts for a while.
Right.
And
you gotta study.
That improves your speed. Make your own, man. I would create my own because I was like, man, I really wish they had a key for this, or I wanted it closer to
100%
to my thumb or my index finger. I wanted it closer. Well, move it closer. Like customize it for yourself, and that totally changes the game and the speed 100%. For you, right?
Completely.
And so here's my gripe with the magnetic, and you're probably gonna be like, oh yeah, this is the keyboard shortcut that you should have been using. So if I'm building out the timeline and I have, and I want to move something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I pull it out, it pushes everything back together.
Tilde. Hold the tilde and drag. And it gets rid of the magnetic properties for that clip.
Okay, so then it keeps a gap in the center there, and I can fill it in. Okay, cool.
Or
see, I knew there was a shortcut that I was missing.
Or
I'm a gap editor.
So you hit P. So the main tools, right? You have the normal grab where you can the arrow where you can grab and do whatever.
Yeah.
It's the normal tool, right? B for blade, or C for cut, whatever, right? B for blade. Trim, T, same, trim back and forth. You can, when you're shifting inside of a clip, right? P, the one that nobody ever uses, is the place function. And that place function, you can just literally just grab it and move it anywhere you want. You have to be careful with it because if you're shifting it down the timeline, you will overwrite something. So, but if you just want to get it off of your main timeline and move it up above it so you can put something else down on the bottom there, hit P, click, and move it.
Yeah. And so does that create a gap?
It creates a gap.
Okay, see, because that was my issue was like I'm moving.
It wasn't creating a gap. Everything was shifted through.
Yeah, and then I'm like, if I had,
I didn't learn that for years.
Yeah.
I didn't learn it for years. Yeah. It took me forever but once I was like, oh my gosh, this is, and because I was always create a gap clip,
right?
Resize it, and then move the clip wherever I wanted to, and then it But no, like if I want to move a section of something, right, and I just want to take everything that's there and all the audio that's attached to it, any sound effects, and I just want to move them later in the thing, right, but I want to leave a hole there so that I can visually see it, hit P. That's how Premiere editors work. And oddly enough, it's P in Final Cut, right?
Yeah,
place, but it's Premiere. You're like that's another way to think of it. It's like you're literally just moving it from here to there.
Yeah.
And a lot of those tools, a lot of those little things. I didn't learn. Like I'd been editing in Final Cut for years at this point, and I went to training with a guy. Shout out to Tony Hewitt, who is he has digital training and designs here in Addison. They used to have a facility down there, and they would train people on Premiere and After Effects and Dreamweaver and like everything. If you were creating, Photoshop, all of it. It was really, really cool. And then they had a Logic, Motion, and Final Cut class. And I was fast. I was already fast. But I took so we had a funny story is we had we did a mass wedding. And this was before I was working at a church at the time. We had a mass wedding, and we married like 30 couples. It was nuts. And I cut a video that night before I left the building of a recap of the wedding and the reception, and dropped it for the next morning. And we played it in the service the next morning because the wedding was on a Saturday. We played it on a Sunday, and they were like, "Oh my god,
this was on Final, right?
This was all on Final.
Had to be.
Had to be. Never would have happened in Premiere. It just because for me the workflow isn't that fast. So I'm editing all of this in Final Cut and everything else, and I had some pain points in it just because I wanted to do certain things and I couldn't get it to do it, and I was like, I wish this program did this. And a couple months later, the video producer we had on staff at the time was like, how did you edit that so fast? I was like, I use Final Cut. He was like, I use Premiere, and I can't ever edit that fast. So I was like, well, let's go to Final Cut training. So I took him, one other staff person, and myself just to go so we could all be there together. We could talk about the workflow while we're there and everything else. And like literally day one, his mind was just blown. He was like, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know this was an option. Like they let you do that? How do you do what? And if anything you're doing with multicam, I'm sorry, Final Cut is the only way to edit multicam. Premiere's multicam workflow is garbage.
I was about to say
it is hot garbage.
I know we're almost at like 45 minutes on this podcast already, but I wanted to say the multicam. Yeah, I mean, this could literally be a 3 to 10 hour episode.
Yeah,
the multicam feature I just had a discussion with the Premiere editor, and I'm like, hey, just use multicam to get this footage and audio and multiple tracks and lanes, and then it's, you use it as a nested in your timeline. And
I think he and I talked about the same project because just like,
and then I got on YouTube and I'm like, does Premiere not have, like, is this not a thing?
It is a thing. It has it, but it's not well designed. So what basically, for what in my experience, what you have to do, and I'm sure Valentina V can correct me on this all day long because she's brilliant. You have to have that like the final audio track that you want to use. Like if you have, say you're doing an interview with two people, right? There's no easy way to switch your audio takes between tracks in your multicam. You're selecting cameras. You're not selecting audio, right? With Final Cut Multicam gives me the ability to select single audio tracks, multiple audio tracks, any video track that I want. I can layer multicams and then treat each one of them differently. Like there's so many variables to it and so many different ways to utilize that function inside of Final Cut that it is the most powerful multicam editing tool on the market, hands down. Hands down.
I won't argue that at all. One of the things that still just blows my mind though is that you have to download a plugin for an adjustment layer. Like we not gonna skip over that.
Well,
no, we're not gonna skip over that.
It's not.
What year is it, bro?
It's not a plugin. It's all it is a title. That it just.
But it doesn't even come built in. Like you got a third party that much.
Because technically you don't need.
You
don't need it. I know this is hurting you. You technically don't need an adjustment layer.
But it's such an intuitive way to edit.
So yes, and I use adjustment layers. I do use adjustment
layers. From a third party source.
No, I actually created my own. It's not a third. I have. So if you're using,
see that?
If you're using Premiere,
that's energy.
And
I don't want to spend.
If you're using Premiere and you have, it took 3 seconds. Like it's not really energy, right? But 3 seconds of work to save you hours in the future. Okay, come on. But no,
just give us the update already, though. Final, come on.
Should an adjustment layer be a standard title inside of Final? Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Technically, you don't need it to work in Final Cut.
Well, you don't need it.
You don't need it to work in like on color and things like that in Final Cut. I find it.
Oh, see.
And that's the thing. It's like. I use it a little bit. I use it completely different than you.
I color and adjustment.
You do. I know you do
exclusively.
And I don't.
Oh,
but it makes it much easier for me to go back and make small adjustments on individual clips, and then if I'm and on a multicam.
But aren't you like copy pasting your effects of like the color on like every?
So
clip?
I create a preset for my main color tools. And then so like if I'm doing it's Shift Command V and I'm copying those specifically those presets from like say if I use this angle once and it's the same room or whatever, I'll copy them over here. And if I need to shift around inside the wheels or the thing, I can. But the way that Final Cut uses effects, it's almost like your adjustment layer is built into the clip because of how it stacks the effects. Because this one leads into this one, leads into this one, leads into this one.
The one thing that I'll say though is that when I'm coloring clips in adjustment layers, if I have a scene that's all the same thing, I take it and I drag it across, and boom, I got a base grade for everything. And if I need to make tiny tweaks, I can either cut the adjustment layer or just go into the clip.
Into the individual clip and add it.
Exactly. Right. Which I always cut the adjustment layer so that all of the color is organized. But.
Right, which is basically, I mean, it's similar. It's doing the same thing. You're just
but you got to admit it's a little bit faster.
No, not for me.
See,
it's not because I'm selecting the clip anyway.
The other thing is if I want to like A/B test my color and not color or whatever, like past Rec 709.
I can do that anyway.
Yeah, but you got to go into the clip and then go to something, whereas I can just, from the timeline, toggle.
I have a disable effects keyboard shortcut.
Command-Shift-E is that in Premiere too. I can do it, but...
And the gloves come back out. Well, I feel like this is round 7 of the debate.
But I mean, there's it's... Like I said at the beginning, it's a tool for a job. And so and literally whatever works for you to get the job done. The only thing is, have you ever had to add a LUT on export to make it look right?
Shots fired.
You got a point there.
Joey's like, hey, we're wrapping this out.
And that's time, folks. Premiere's export is absolute garbanzo beans.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like exporting in Final Cut is super simple, and it's fast. Like
once you get the M1 though, it's super fast on a.
It's true, Mac. But I've never exported. Now I had a buddy of mine. He has the Max M1 Max. with like maxed everything.
Out.
It's incredible. It's literally It's not the Max Ultra squared. Like the Mac Studio. That'd be nice, but and when I took my timeline and it was a 45-minute 4K cut.
Yeah.
Effects on everything.
Yeah.
Intense. It said it was going to take, because I don't have one of those fancy new M1s. I'm still rocking an Intel because I bought it before I bought it. They had introduced the M1 Mac or the iMac, which was not capable of doing, like that initial version was not capable of doing anything that I do professionally. It just wasn't going to work. So I went ahead and got the Intel and maxed it. Like, it's got great specs. It's awesome. But it was going to take 3.5 hours to export this thing. 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's fire.
And it was 4K.
That's fire.
And it was intense. So, like,
well, go ahead, Shane.
I was going to say, I mean, and we probably don't have time for this, but the autosave feature, okay? Like, 100%. Can I just 2 more gripes on Premiere?
That's
when you crash and you lose stuff, and but
he autosaves every 3 minutes.
I autosave every 3 minutes, so it's a preference setting. You go in there and you just.
So what happens if it crashes before those 3 minutes?
You restore it from a backup.
So you restore it from a backup. So every 3 minutes, I never lose my.
But like if you know how much work I get done in 3 minutes on Final. If I lost like 2.5 minutes before it autosaves,
but you can change it to every like 30 seconds.
Okay, so that's good. That's good.
You can shrink the time, but if you have a big project, that autosave takes more time.
Yeah.
So the larger your project, the larger those backups become, and the longer it takes to autosave them.
Yeah.
Final Cut and Resolve has added it too. Auto update.
The one thing though that feature has saved me though, where like if I've accidentally done something destructive like
and you
5
can't
minutes
get
ago,
and you can't get back to it.
I can reopen it and then just copy what I did and move it over.
So you can do the same thing in Final Cut.
Yeah.
You can open from a backup because it creates backups, and so like it does a very similar thing. You can change the time, but the project itself, It automatically saves every time you make a change, and I can't and I've had Final Cut crash too. It's not like it. Every program is going to crash at some point. It's a computer. Things are going to not work. That's what happens. It's technology. It ain't perfect.
Come on, Elon Musk. We need you.
Right.
We need Elon on Premiere.
That's the next purchase there. I doubt it, but that'd be nice. No, so it has saved me.
Yeah.
Multiple times when I open it back up, it's crashed or the computer's doing something weird and I can't and I have to force quit it or something like that. Open it back up and it's right where I left off.
Yeah.
I'm not missing a beat.
Okay, and then let's just get one more in the render thing. And again, I've been out for 2 years, but
the render thing is fire in Final Cut because it's in the background.
It's in the background.
You can turn it off too. And I never have background render on.
This is what I'll say though.
Unless it's a major effect.
You don't. On the new Macs, though, I don't even need to render my stuff. It's
and to be fair, most of the footage that we're working with isn't as intense as it would be on an older system. On the newer system,
I mean, even when I shoot on Red, and throw it in there, like on my laptop, my M1 laptop,
for sure,
it's fine,
absolutely,
without rendering anything. The whole project,
and the same thing. Like, so if I'm doing Red footage on my iMac or on my Intel, it's great. It's fantastic. I still have to do that because mine's new enough that it's, now my laptop, it would probably catch on fire. But
up in smoke.
Yeah, but
so technology's definitely changed that thing. Because I remember when, I would dabble in Premiere. I taught a post-production class at the King's University and thankfully
shout out professor over here.
Yeah. And thankfully it was mostly theory because I was already, starting to phase out more into producing, and I'm like, it's been a while since I've edited, but I can teach you a lot of theory and processes, right? And organizing keywords, bins,
dropping everything in the timeline, right?
Yeah. From the get-go. I had Joey be a guest speaker, and I ended up having COVID that week, so I wasn't there. So I don't even know what he taught them. But
he taught them that. He taught them just put everything in the
put everything Shane told you and drop it all in the timeline. Abandoned files.
Oh man!
I must say I do love taking new editors who have never and whichever program they're using and just helping them become better editors. I love that.
And Go ahead.
It goes back to, I think, what you said. It's a tool just like a camera, right? I mean, just like, oh, should I use the iPhone for this because of my target audience and the speed to market or whatever I'm trying to do? Or do I need a Red camera?
For sure.
And I think it comes down to it, even in the NLEs, and it's kind of preference as well, right?
Yeah.
Experience, like even the keyboard shortcut that I didn't know, I was using, I'm a hacker, like
for sure.
I hack any
do what you gotta do
software
to
that I
make it work.
need to make it work, right?
Yep.
And so Final Cut, I think, was very intuitive where I could hack it quicker than Premiere, where it would be harder to hack.
For sure.
It had to stay in the parameter.
I'll give you that.
But then there's, like Joey's got his system that works super well in Premiere. Your edits are fire. You know what I mean? And so it really just comes down to the tool and then the artist itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I feel like it's the takeaway. There's not
100%.
It shouldn't matter what NLE you're using.
Totally.
If you can't get a good edit
You're the
on
problem.
Premiere Rush on your phone.
on iMovie.
On
iMovie. I had the kids at TKU editing on iMovie, and some of the edits were, students, terrible, and then other edits were like, I was super impressed with the stuff that they were doing in iMovie, right? And that was like, hey, they were excited to get in Premiere and Dissolve. And I'm like, that's the next step. That's what we'll be doing in like course 2, right? When they were actually getting, but we're learning theory, and here's the most simple, easiest tools that you can have access to on your phone, right? Because we're having to shoot on the phone. And it was impressive to see what an artist, right, will use a tool and create something that I was just blown away by, right? And so I don't think it comes down to the specific tool or the artist. It's a combo of the two and how those come together.
Nobody ever goes up to a baker that makes a really good cake and
What
says,
kind of flour
"Wow,
did you use?"
that was a really good oven."
Yeah,
like, Nobody says the oven that you use is fire.
Yeah.
It's the baker.
Even though it literally.
That was my first question.
No
I was going to
intended.
ask, what kind of oven did you use to bake this cake? Because I can taste it.
I got that LG. It's got the air fry baked in, you know what I'm saying? Well, yeah, just tailing off of what you guys said, and I'll wrap this up. But
we could do this all day.
Yeah,
You
literally
better
all
do it now.
day. But what I did hear when we were talking is that all of us do basically the same thing in just a different
It's different
way.
ways, yeah.
But the whether the process from point A to point B looks different, we still are organizing our stuff. We're still,
That's a key. Whichever one you use, you have to be organized.
100%.
If you have no organization, that's we probably should have started there, honestly, because that's like the biggest tool.
You got to get organized.
That's the biggest tool for any editor is being organized.
Yeah. We didn't talk about how to edit. We were just talking about why the other software is better. But
We should
have another
We should do
podcast
one
on
on how to edit. Yeah.
The steps of editing. Yep, that's great.
yeah. Well, guys, this has been fun to say the least. I'm glad that I won this battle.
Did we keep a
Where
scorecard
is the
here? I feel like
score?
Premiere was lacking on that.
We'll let the listeners be the judge.
There you go. Listeners, comment on the YouTube.
Y'all let us know.
Comment on the Instagram.
If y'all use bins, if y'all just throw it all on the timeline.
Shout out to Thomas
if you use
Grove
Premiere,
Carter.
if you use
Final
Final.
Cut for the win.
But yeah, when you're making your own rough cut,
There you go.
drop it all in the timeline. That's notes to take away.
We'll let I think the comments should choose the winner.
Yeah,
this will be
right.
fun to
There you
see.
go.
Well, how do people get connected, Joey?
Yeah, so if you guys want to get connected with us, you can follow at the Rough Cut Club on all platforms. And if you want to get connected with Andy, how can people find you or learn more about you, man?
I am my handle is at Sound Vision Mix.
Yeah.
On pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So hit me up there if seriously, if anybody has any questions. I love pouring into people. I love
This is facts.
helping people like solve problems. Give me a problem, let me solve it. That makes me happy. That's literally all
Andy
you have
is
to do.
my go-to problem solver. Whenever I run into a crossroads, I'm like, Andy, what do I do?
How do I fix this?
How do I fix this? And he's always got the answer.
I love doing it. I absolutely love it. And I if you got a question about any NLE or how to do this or what kind of camera
or
can do
music,
this,
or broadcast, or cameras, or television, or 5 kids.
I'm a plethora of useless information.
He is
They
the
called
man.
They called me Google at my last full-time gig. So
Andy
it's
the
kinda
man.
fun. But yeah, just any DM me, shoot me any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer.
Get in his DMs.
Slide in the DMs.
Don't slide into them.
Go down in the DMs. They go down.
I got no, but seriously, yeah,
Dudes only slide in the DMs.
Tech questions only.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
No, but yeah, I do love answering them.
Yeah.
I do love answering
That's
them.
awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time being on the podcast today. Thank you for being the very first VIP Rough Cut Club member added to the club, baby.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been a great episode. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time on the Rough Cut Club.
There's no high five.
Woo!